There's a couple of reasons why I'd never live in Bangkok again. While Bangkok is a really great place, I wanted to point out some of the negatives that so many people have to face when they live in Thailand's capital. I'm not an enemy of the capital, I'm not an enemy of Thailand, I don't hate Thailand. Any place has good and bad sides. Any place has pros and cons. And I wanted to point out my personal experience while I was living in Bangkok, Thailand, and why I think it's a bad idea to live there in case you cannot accept the following things. One of the most obvious problems that digital nomads and also expats run into when living in Bangkok, Thailand is the visa situation. Yeah, you could argue, okay, you can get a student visa or you can get a Thai elite visa. I mean, there are options, right? Thai elite visa, if you want to have a limited social visit pass to the country, it's going to be $18,000, 600,000 Thai baht for 5 years, or it's going to be $32,000, a million Thai baht for 20 years. And while that is not exactly cheap, depending on what you do for a living, but still, paying about $2,000 to $3,000 a month for a social visit pass, because that's all that you get for that, right? It's not like it's a work permit, it's not like it's a business visa, it's not like it's some kind of residence, it's not. All it really is an extended stay allowance. I do know people who ended up paying that money, and for them it's not just about the money, because for them, $18,000 to $32,000, they're gonna make that money in maybe 1 to 3 months, whatever. They're gonna make that money in a couple months time, and so for them it's not a big deal paying that. But still, from a legal perspective, you aren't really allowed to work in Thailand anyway, at least not for a Thai company. So I have a friend of mine, and what he does is he ends up paying taxes in Thailand. He declares his money and he pays his income taxes in Thailand. Because if he wouldn't do that, then chances are the government would kick him out, because, the government just doesn't believe that a person that's in his 20s, 30s, or 40s can live in the country without earning an income and without paying taxes back to the Thai government. Well, it sounds like it is a good deal because you're paying $18,000 and you don't have any further problems down the road. That is in fact not reality, because I have heard of people and I have known people that actually got that visa, and what happened to them was something really drastic, which was that they got kicked out of the country because they did not declare income taxes. You can't really live in Thailand on a tourist visa anymore. You can't do visa runs. You can maybe do it once or twice. But if the government sees that this is a habit of yours, then you may be banned from entering the country. You could also argue that you could get like a 6-month tourist visa prior to entering the country, which can be applied for at the consulate or embassy in your home country. That's an argument again, but I also know people that have continuously applied for the 6-month multi-entry visa, and they have really become less likely to obtain it, and some have even been rejected. You gotta consider all of this. So if you want to live in Thailand for the long term, the visa situation is difficult unless you have some kind of job offer, unless you start a business, you have a Thai partner and you're willing to invest money, unless you're an investor, unless you marry obviously a Thai man or woman. That's another option. That would definitely give you a long-term visa, long-term residency. But in case you're unwilling to do any of that, it's going to be difficult. Low level of English proficiency. That's a very common problem in most Southeast Asian countries. If you take a look at the Thai language and how it differs from, any Roman language, you can kind of understand or have compassion for Asians and why they are not good at, Roman languages, because they don't use the alphabet. Their grammar is typically very simple. They don't have the present perfect tense. They don't have past tense, past perfect. Some countries don't have that. So, if you come from a country, that uses a very simple language, it's going to be very difficult for you to learn an advanced language. But for a person, for like a Thai person, for like a Vietnamese, to learn English or to learn Swedish or French, Italian, going to be more difficult for them than it would be for an Italian or a Frenchman, to come to Vietnam or Thailand and learn the local language there. And the problem with language barrier and the low English proficiency across Thailand is that you're going to have a difficult time at making friends with locals. I mean, you can make friends with locals, but it's not like you can have a decent, a very deep conversation with them, unless of course you learn the Thai language, which I advise you to do anyway in case you want to live in the country for the long term. Anybody living in any country for an extended period of time should consider at least consider learning the local language, because why wouldn't you? It's going to help you out everyday life. You're going to know the street names, you can read it in the local language. You're going to be able to communicate. You can order things when you go out to eat. Right, has so many advantages, but in case you're unwilling to do that and you want to get by with your local language, whatever that is, your native language, or you want to get by with English, you can get by, but it's not going to be the same experience as it might be back home. Let's talk about the environmental issue that Bangkok is in. Bangkok is not a clean city, okay? Let's just throw it out as it is. It's not a clean city. It's very polluted. The pollution levels vary depending on the months of the year, but generally speaking, and that's not just for people with preconditions, for people who have asthma, for people who have allergies. Bangkok is a terrible place for them, a terrible place, because it exposes you to all the things you're vulnerable. If you don't want that, then Bangkok is not a good choice. But also, in case you're a healthy person, it may still ruin your health over time. It's going to deteriorate your health, because if you come from a very clean environment, and that's why so many people that live in Western countries who come, to a place like Bangkok, Thailand, do end up with health issues, maybe not just immediately, but further down the road, because they left a very clean environment, an environment with zero to no air pollution, an environment to come to an environment that's very polluted. Bangkok is very industrial. I mean, there's so many issues where you could say, living in Bangkok for the long term is definitely going to deteriorate your health. The low education level is another big problem. People in Southeast Asia are not necessarily very educated. It's not their fault. It's the education system that's at fault. What they learn from their parents, what they learn in school is not exactly the same quality as what you learn in the West. I'm not saying that in terms of etiquette. I'm just saying that in terms of general knowledge, general understanding. It just isn't the same quality of education that they get. If you deal with people in Bangkok, Thailand, you may get frustrated sometimes because they're not going to understand a lot of the things that are very clear to you, or you're going to end up having an argument over something very trivial, that you would never argue with somebody back home. That's another thing that you have to accept. You have to accept all these points that I'm pointing out today, because if not, then Bangkok, Thailand is just not the right place for you. Foreigners are never prioritized. What do I mean by that? Well, it's pretty simple. In terms of visas, in terms of rights, in terms of legal strength, you have no legal strength in a place like country. If it's you against a local person, you're just never going to have luck. The law is just not created in a way to serve the foreigner. The law is created in a way to extract money from the foreigner, but not to help the foreigner win a case if a foreigner has a problem with a local. If it's a case with a foreigner against a local, you're just not going to have a lot of luck. And we have seen this so many times with foreigners, that purchase real estate and they put it under their Thai wives' names, and they ended up losing the property after divorce, or they went back home and the wife just sold the property and the husband's absent and kept all the money and didn't tell the husband anything about it. Those things happen on a regular basis. They're more common than anybody would care to admit, but I thought I should point them out, because the last thing that you would want is to come to a tropical paradise like Thailand and get scammed. Low hygiene and food standards is another big problem. Why is it a problem? Well, you're going to get food poison, you're going to get diarrhea, and that's just what's going to happen in Thailand. Is it going to happen very often? Well, it depends on where you eat and how often you eat there. It's mathematics. It may happen 1 in 20 or 30 times. It may happen only 1 in 100 times, 1 in 300 times, depending on your system. How well your system is ready, is capable to fight and combat viruses and bacteria. If you come from a Western country and you've never lived in the tropics, any little thing is going to throw you apart. Now you could argue, well, after time, my body's going to adjust. I'm not going to have these problems anymore. Well, that's partially true. You're still going to have the problems, but they're going to be less severe, but they're still going to happen. Because even locals, even Thais do get food poison. Even Thais do get diarrhea at times, depending on, again, what they eat and where they eat it. The low environmental awareness. In the West, people are very focused on the environment, keeping it clean, keeping it organized. You can't really say the same thing about Thailand in many cases. In many cases, Thailand's actually good, it's very clean, but in many cases it also isn't. If you're the kind of person who gets bothered by, people that don't care about the environment, if environmental awareness is very important to you, then I definitely recommend you to not come to Thailand, because it's going to bug you. You're not going to be happy with it. Now that you've heard about my personal reasons as to why I'd never live in Bangkok again, I would love to hear from you. Tell me about your perspective. Tell me about what you think about the points we discussed in this video by leaving a comment below. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm uploading new videos on digital nomad locations, travel updates, visas, crypto advice, and business advice several times a week right now. I highly recommend that you grab a free copy of my ebook Nomad Elite, the Insider's Guide to Retaining a Life of Freedom. All you need to do is click on the link below the video. And if you got some more time left, check out these videos. Thank you for watching.